Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing. Hi, Michael. It's great to have you here today.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for inviting me to this blog.
Yeah, no, it's great. There's lots of things we're going to talk about today, and they're really important things to talk about. But before we get into it, you want to introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about you?
Yes, so I'm Michael Hinett. I am the director of Qualis Solutions. We're a group of companies that aim to provide an end-to-end solution for people in social care. So whether you're looking to start, grow, or improve in social care, we should be able to assist with that. I also have my own supported living business called ProLibertas Care Solutions.
Brilliant. So you kind of see it from both sides, don't you?
Yes.
And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today was about new providers coming into the supported living space. What I do at Gateway, I talk to an awful lot of providers, and an awful lot of the providers I'm speaking to are new into supported living. And I kind of wondered if you could kind of set the background to that. Why are there so many new providers coming into supported living at the moment?
Obviously, I can't tell you conclusively, but I think there's a lot of the providers that I speak to. So the new startups that are, well, I want to do supported living. Money is a big motivator. There are certain consultants out there that are a little bit more sharky than they should be, and the focus is very much that you can make a lot of money from the property, and you can also do the care if you put certain things in place. Obviously, CQC like that separation to be there, but there are currently ways around that, so you can make quite a lot of money. So if you look at getting a couple of services up and running from a supported living perspective, you could be looking at 500-600 hours. If you were doing dom care, getting 500 and 600 hours is significantly more people, significantly more staff because of the way that the runs are done. So it is easier in supported living to an extent to get a higher number of hours in a shorter period of time. But obviously the support is more complex.
It's probably useful to explain what dom care is at this point, so people understand the difference between dom care and supported living, Michael.
Yeah, so if you think of most people think of care, and traditionally they would think of somebody going into a care home as they approach the later years of their life. Dom care is domicilary care or home care. It's where somebody receives support in their own home, and quite frequently it's broken up into pop-in visits. So you might have a medication or a meal pop-in at 9 o'clock in the morning, or 8, or even earlier than that in some cases. Then another one at 12, another one at 5, and then you might have another one. So from a provider perspective, it's very difficult to find a member of staff who's going to come in, go on, come in, go on, come in, go on, or to build a run. If you can build a run where a member of staff's doing a full 8 hours of work, then it's fine. But as a new provider, getting those runs, because local authorities, as much as they say they will work with you to create runs, I've never actually come across it. So it can be very, very difficult, and it's very time intensive doing the rotas and things like that. Supported living sits in between. Supported living is predominantly used for people with learning disabilities and mental health needs. It's about having a focus on that person having a home for life. It's very, very person-centered way of doing support. Dom care tends to be commissioned in a very time and task-focused way, depending on the local authority. But supported living, because of the abundance or the additional hours, not abundance, because that's never the case, the additional hours help you to be more person-centered. When I got into supported living many, many moons ago, we were working with people, so the local authority would highlight people that are compatible. You would work with that person then, or those people, sorry, to find a property, their forever home, and you would work with their family, the social worker and the commissioners, and you would build that home for life with them. So they would pick the furniture, the decorations. That's how it should be. More frequently, more recently, I see it not that way, and people are coming out through some sort of digital e-brokerage system where it's one person, and if you don't have a void, then you can't really bid for that person unless you know how to project manage and time that out. It makes it quite difficult. So you get a lot of providers now are using the private rental market and things such as the Gateway, because it's giving them access to quicker property. If you're working with typical registered social landlords, they're more than happy to get involved in that space, but the time that it takes often means that you lose that package to somebody who's faster at providing the property.
So if you're a provider, there's a bonus to you to being able to get hold of property fairly quickly to be able to respond to those needs. Otherwise, you lose that job effectively, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but it's got to be the right property in the right place, and it's got to match the needs of the people. And quite frequently, people obviously send properties to us and say, "What do you think about this?" And they're looking at putting something together for someone who's got complex autism, but it's on a main road, and it's got no garden space, and the rooms are tiny because it's a brand new house. It just doesn't work. It's got to be the needs of the individuals have got to dictate the type of property, not getting a property first and then trying to match the individuals to that property. The difficulty in that kind of situation is you end up shoehorning somebody into a property that doesn't fit them. And we all know that if you're working with people that have complex needs, the environment is a key trigger for a lot of people. So getting the environment right is absolutely key.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem, though, when I'm talking to providers, that they're being asked by local authorities to provide care in a supported living way rather than dom care for some individuals now as well. That's a bit of a driver from some local authorities. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, well, again, it depends on the local authority. So we work with Cheshire West. Cheshire West are very clear that they will commission multiple people that are compatible, and then they will expect you as the provider to find that property. But you still need to have that separation between who provides housing and who provides care. We're also working with Calderdale. Calderdale will find the property for you. I think if I think back to the time that I first got into supported living, there was no real private market for landlords to do supported living. It was all done through registered social landlords. Obviously, they claim the exempt rents, which in some cases can be incredibly high, and they expect, because of the way that they're funded, they expect that rent regardless. So in the past, the RSLs have tied local authorities into the void agreements, which has then meant that as people have aged and compatibility becomes more difficult, the local authorities have then had lots of voids to pay for. They've then moved away from having anything to do with property because they don't want to be tied into that. So it tends to be providers now that assure those voids, which is a massive business risk for a provider, but it's either take that business risk or don't provide services. So when we're looking for people to provide property for us, it has to have a good void agreement in place.
There's always a challenge around void agreements, isn't there, between landlords and the providers, and it's always a little bit of a battle in the negotiation, isn't it, as to who takes that void.
Definitely it is. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all businesses. Making money is a key focus of most businesses, depending on how you're registered, obviously. Nobody wants to take too much risk, and as a new business, taking too much risk, if you lose 3 or 4 people and you've got 3 or 4 properties and you've got 3 or 4 voids to pay for, that could wipe your business out. So you need to balance those risks and take calculated risk and have contingencies in place.
Yeah, it's really difficult because as a property investor, when you're negotiating and having these conversations with providers, you want to be supportive, but equally you have no control over the quality of the care that's being provided. So, and there has to be a bit of a relationship between the quality of the care and the void. You know, if you're providing brilliant, excellent service that the local authority recognise, you're probably not going to have the voids than if you're maybe not such a great provider. You know, I know it's not quite as straightforward as that, is it? But
I think there are times that no matter how much work you put in, I mean, being a flexible and adaptable provider, when particularly if you're working with people with autism, that is absolutely key to being successful. The changes in need that people have, and you know, the responsive Chloe that CQC assess against is a key part of being successful with people that have complex needs. What was the rest of what you were saying then?
Yeah, no, it's just about the void liability and how, you know, as a property investor,
I worked, obviously I'm Lancashire based. I worked with Lancashire, and at one point they had, I think it was about £1.5 million worth of void the local authority was paying for. we work with RSLs, and we like to have a decent void assurance. So there's a lead in as we take a new property on. They're not just going to sting us with all the rent immediately, because you don't want to transition too many people into a new space at the same time, because that's just going to set yourself up for failure. And likewise, if we've had that service full and there's somebody moves out for whatever reason, we like there to be a lead-in period, so we have time to refill that before that void is expected from us. And there are RSLs out there that will do that. And I think from the conversations that I had with private landlords, there are some that are also quite flexible on that.
Yeah. People look at the long-term role, and as a landlord, it's important that you're open to these conversations and supportive of the businesses and organisations taking leases on your properties, aren't they? It isn't a straightforward transaction. You need to make sure it suits everybody, really.
It's a journey that both of you are on. If you are both successful, if you both work together, you're more likely to be successful, aren't you? If the void agreement is so prohibitive to you as a business that as soon as somebody moves out, you're immediately paying that rent, then you're less likely to take on more properties with that particular provider, and two, it could end up shutting your business down if you can't refill that void. So there needs to be that co-working to get a mutual agreement. I've always, for me, if you could get a 50-50 void agreement after a period of time, so build in a bit of a contingency within the rent that will give you that bit of a buffer, but then after that period of time, a 50-50 risk share would be, I think that would be fair, if I'm honest. I mean, ultimately, supported living is supposed to be about the person. The person has their own tenancy, it's their home. You as a provider, if you're not meeting the needs of that individual because their needs have changed, or you're not able to provide that specialist support, then you're moved out and the local authority brings another provider in. And that puts a lot of risk on the housing association, because if that provider doesn't want to sign that SLA, not much you can do.
That's that service level agreement, isn't it, between you two when we're talking SLAs? Absolutely. So with the new providers starting up, there's obviously a lot of challenge with them getting their first property. From a property investor perspective, you look at them and you think, well, they've got no track record. Some of these businesses have only been running a few months, haven't they, and trying to get property, so they've not even got 12 months accounts. And from a property investor, when you're doing due diligence on someone taking a lease on your property, they look like quite a risky prospect compared to some of the more established providers. It is a difficult situation, isn't it?
Yeah, massively. I think a lot of the new businesses that we work with, there are people that have, because we're quite selective at who we work with. We do a little bit of an interview with everybody that comes through. We work with a lot of people that have worked with consultancies previously and that haven't really delivered. We work with nurses that have done it from one side and want to do more in the community. We work with social workers that have commissioned it and then decided they want to do it. So we do a lot of the 16 plus stuff as well as the regulated side of things. And yeah, it's getting that first property up and running. Once that first property is up and running, it is a little bit easier, and then it becomes a balance, because if you deliver to the local authority, they tend to then give more and more and more, and it can become quite easy for you to become overwhelmed. If you're working with RSLs, one of the key things that's a bit of a stumbling block is getting the local authority to say, yes, we will commission into this property. That's massively difficult. Some local authorities will do it, others won't. If you take any property on in a private arrangement, that's a massive business risk for you, because there's no guarantees that you will fill that property. If you're working with a local authority that's like Cheshire and you're bidding for people through an e-brokerage system, that can be a way to evidence that you've been successful with this person. You show them the property, they're happy with the property. You can then use that as a way to say, this is how we're going to do things. What we're finding on a regular basis now is people came through to us initially for maybe CQC registration or tender writing, or both, thinking that once they were on a framework, once they have the CQC, they would then get on a framework. Once they were on a framework, it was then just going to fall at their feet. it isn't like that. We did the tender for, I think it was Essex last year, and we got a full list of all the providers that have been successful. There was like 65 providers that have been successful. So every one of those mini bids, potentially, you're going to be bidding against 65 people. So you've got to show what sets you apart from them. And part of that is the property that you're able to access and how quickly, in many cases, you can access that. Because a lot of the people that come through the frameworks, they're in desperate need for it, particularly now around COVID. A lot of people that would have been moving haven't been moving because of the perceived additional risk. A lot of people that would be transitioning from young at home, they're not transitioning into their own supported living site. They're staying at home because there's that fear around COVID in social care.
As a property investor, if you're approached by a brand new provider who is saying, I want to just take a lease on your property, you need to be asking them actually what state you're in, where are you at in your tendering process? Are you actually able to get referrals to make sure that they're actually a sustainable business?
Yeah, I mean, from a new business perspective, most local authorities have some sort of framework in place. There is a little bit of off framework commissioning that happens. But it's not anywhere near what it used to be in the past. So the provider needs to be on a framework. They need to be confidently expressing interest and having conversations with social workers about people that are going to be transitioning. And they need to be looking for some fairly specific property because it should be matching the needs of the individuals. Ideally, what should be happening is you're working with those individuals to find out what type of property they want. They want a detached property that's in the middle of nowhere, then you need to be looking for that detached property for them. Some people want to live closer to the middle of towns. It shouldn't really be that the provider is approaching somebody for a property when they're not ready to start looking at people.
Though I do get that a lot. I do get a lot of people saying, I just want a 3 or 4 bed house to start off with. They haven't got referrals yet. They just want something that they think will be a generic fit for the group they're working with. And
the problem with that as well is if you're not seeing where those referrals are, how do you know where you need that property? If you're looking in Lancashire, you could end up with a property that's in the middle of nowhere and all the referrals are coming through for Burnley or Accrington. You need to at least be seeing where those referrals are so that you can put the property in the right place. If nobody wants to live in your property, that supported living is about choice and giving that person, empowering that person to make those adult decisions that everybody takes for granted in most cases. And if you're just saying, well, this is my property, it's not really supported living.
No. So as a property owner, you need to be checking that someone's got CQC registration if they need it. Now, obviously, they're not all groups of.
Yeah, well, and I suppose on the flip side of that is the unregulated provision, which is completely different. It's funded in a different way. There's frameworks out there that if you don't have a property, you can't really apply. There's more out of borough placements happening for those, particularly those frameworks that are around cities, because of obviously gang culture, county lines crime, that kind of thing.
When we talk, sorry to interrupt you. When we talk this group, when we talk about unregulated, we're talking about 16 to 18s, aren't we? Typically.
Yeah. So the unregulated provision. So depending on your local authority, some of unaccompanied asylum seekers come under that as well. There's lots of people that have been exposed to child sexual exploitation, gang crime, county lines crime, that kind of stuff. It's looked after children that. I think that the difficulty is obviously when you're at home, you live with your parents. They show you all the things that you need to do to be an adult. Most people don't leave home these days, I don't think, until they're 23, 24 years old. If you're in a children's home when you get to 16, that's kind of it. You don't really get to carry on. So the local authority, because they've got that corporate parental responsibility, they then, for certain people that aren't quite ready, they look at the semi-independent, unregulated 16 plus type accommodation. In some areas, depending on the needs of the people, it can go up to 25. So if it's people that have additional learning disabilities, it can go to 25. But it's generally a 2-year pathway for people that are 16 to 18 years old. And there's some very specific targets that you have to hit for that young person. Teaching them how to be more independent, looking after themselves, looking after their money, getting them into employment or education. It's very, very specific criteria in most cases. And the funding from that as well, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you.
The funding, so with adult care, the funding comes from separate pots of money. So there's been a movement in some local authorities to deregister residential homes for people with learning disability, because it's a better model. It's less restrictive. The people have more access to money, and therefore they're able to do more with their lives. But it's also funded differently, so it works out. Although it works out more expensive overall, it's actually slightly cheaper for most local authorities. Supported living, the person is able to claim full benefits, so they're able to claim money for the rent, money for the council tax, money for their bills, money for activities, and it all comes from different funding streams. The unregulated provision is funded more like residential care, where it's a placement fee. So it's an all-encompassing fee that covers food, heating, lighting, accommodation, and it's all paid to the provider. So it doesn't have that contractual separation. Obviously, it's not regulated by CQC, so you can be the housing provider and the care provider in that kind of setting. But the type of care that you deliver has to be very clear. If it's care from an Ofsted perspective, if it meets the criteria for care and you're providing the accommodation, then Ofsted might want to know about that. So you risk venturing from unregulated to unregistered, and there's a fine, quite a hefty fine, if you do that, if you don't understand the market in which you're actually working.
Mm-hmm. And so the needs for property for that group are, I suppose it depends, doesn't it, again, on the people who are going to be living in the property?
Yeah, I think from my experience with adult supported living is most local authorities and most people like self-contained flats. They like to have their own front door. They like to have a little bit of communal space so that they can interact with the people that they live in the building with. But they like the benefit of having their own front door. A lot of the 16 plus focus tends to be more of a shared house. It's more of a family setting. So I tend to see local authorities are looking for flat complexes, and in some cases they will assure the void still, because they know that they're not going to have those void issues. Compatibility is a lot easier if people have their own front door, whereas with the 16 plus, it tends to be 4, 5, 6 in some cases, depending on the complexity. Shared houses with a little bit of communal space, very much like a family setting.
Like it should be, really. But yeah, absolutely. Michael, thank you. That's been really interesting. Thanks ever so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.